What happens when one of country music's biggest stars comes face to face with late-night television's sharpest tongue? And neither one backs down from a fight that nobody saw coming. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story is about to get intense. The Late Show studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Tim McGraw settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. The country superstar had been making his rounds promoting his latest album, and this appearance was supposed to be another friendly chat about music, family, and life on the road. But from the moment Colbert leaned forward with that trademark smirk, something felt different. "So Tim, I've got to ask," Colbert began, his voice carrying an edge that made McGraw's publicist shift uncomfortably in the wings. "Your new album talks a lot about small-town values and real America. Tell me, what exactly makes someone's America more real than someone else's?" McGraw's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He'd been in the business long enough to recognize a loaded question when he heard one. "Well, Stephen, I think when people work hard, raise their families, and care about their neighbors, that's pretty real no matter where you are." Right. Colbert nodded, but his eyes gleamed with something that wasn't quite agreement. "But see, that's interesting because I grew up in South Carolina. Worked plenty of jobs, raised kids, care about my neighbors. Yet somehow I get the feeling that when you say real America, you're not talking about people like me." The studio audience, sensing tension, fell quieter than usual. McGraw leaned back slightly, his media training kicking in. "I think you're reading into something that isn't there, Stephen. Music brings people together. It doesn't divide them. Does it though?" Colbert pressed, his voice getting sharper. "Because I've been listening to country music lately, and there seems to be an awful lot of us versus them. An awful lot of if you don't think like us, you're not one of us." McGraw's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "That's not what my music is about. No, let me read you some lyrics from your new song." Colbert pulled out a card with exaggerated theatricality. "We don't need your city ways, telling us how we should pray, how we should live, how we should think. We know right from wrong." He looked up with raised eyebrows. "That doesn't sound divisive to you?" "Those lyrics are about independence," McGraw said, his voice rising slightly. "About not being told what to do by people who've never lived your life. But who exactly are these people telling you what to do, Tim? Because last I checked, nobody's forcing anyone to pray differently or live differently. Unless you're talking about, I don't know, maybe people fighting for their basic rights to exist." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. McGraw's publicist was frantically making hand signals from the wings. But both men were locked in now, neither willing to back down. "I'm talking about freedom, Stephen. The freedom to have your own opinions without being attacked for them." "Freedom," Colbert repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Like the freedom to marry who you love, or the freedom to make decisions about your own body, or the freedom to vote without having to jump through hoops. Because it seems to me like whenever people talk about freedom lately, they really mean the freedom to tell other people what they can't do." McGraw's face was flushing red now. "That's not what I'm saying at all, and you know it, do I? Here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing someone who's made millions of dollars singing about small-town values lecture the rest of us about what real America looks like, while living in a mansion in Nashville and flying around in private jets. You don't know anything about how I live my life." McGraw shot back, his voice getting louder. "I know you're sitting here telling me and everyone watching that somehow your version of America is more authentic than ours. I know you're using your platform to promote an us versus them mentality that's tearing this country apart. I'm not promoting anything except hard work and family values." "Whose family values, Tim?" "Because my family values include treating everyone with respect and dignity, regardless of who they are or who they love. My family values include helping people who need help, not building walls to keep them out." McGraw stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "I didn't come here to be lectured by someone who thinks he's better than half the people in this country." The studio fell dead silent. Colbert remained seated, but his voice carried clearly through the tension. "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Tim, but I also don't think I'm worse than anyone just because I happen to disagree with you." "This interview is over," McGraw said, reaching for his mic pack. But Colbert wasn't done. As McGraw fumbled with his microphone, the host's voice cut through the studio like a blade. "Running away doesn't make you right, Tim. It just makes you look like you can't defend your own positions." McGraw froze, his hand halfway to the mic pack clipped to his belt. The words hit him like a physical blow, and for a moment, the only sound in the studio was the hum of the cameras and the collective held breath of 300 audience members. "Excuse me," McGraw turned back around, his eyes blazing. "You think I'm running away? I think you're doing exactly what every person does when they can't defend their beliefs with facts." Colbert replied, still seated but leaning forward now. "You're taking your ball and going home. My beliefs." McGraw's voice cracked with incredulity. "You've been attacking everything I stand for since I sat down in this chair." "No, Tim, I've been asking you to explain what you stand for." There's a difference. The country star took a step back, toward his chair, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You want to know what I stand for? I stand for people who get up every morning and work their tails off to provide for their families. I stand for people who believe in something bigger than themselves. I stand for communities that look out for each other instead of looking down on each other. That's beautiful, Colbert said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. It's also meaningless. Because you know what? I believe in all those things too. The difference is, I don't use those beliefs as an excuse to exclude people or make them feel like they're somehow less American than I am. I have never excluded anyone, McGraw shot back. My concerts are for everyone. My music is for everyone. Really? Because your new album cover shows a small town with a church steeple and an American flag, and not a single person of color in sight. Your music videos are full of pickup trucks and cowboy hats and Confederate flags in the background. Tell me, Tim, when you picture your ideal America, what does it look like? McGraw's face went pale, then red again. You're twisting everything I do to fit your narrative. I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking you to own what you put out into the world. When you sing about real America, when you talk about traditional values, when you wave that flag, you're sending a message. And that message isn't as inclusive as you'd like to pretend it is. Traditional values aren't about exclusion, McGraw insisted, his voice getting hoarse. They're about foundation. They're about having something solid to build on. Whose foundation? Tim. Because the foundation this country was built on included slavery. It included denying women the right to vote. It included genocide against Native Americans. So when you talk about going back to traditional values, you'll forgive me if I ask which traditions exactly you want to go back to. The studio audience was completely silent now, some people looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward in fascination. McGraw's publicist had given up trying to signal from the wings and was now frantically typing on her phone. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it, McGraw said through gritted teeth. I'm talking about honor, integrity, hard work, family, all things that exist in every community, every culture, every walk of life, Colbert replied. So, why do you act like they're exclusive to small-town America? Why do you act like people in cities don't have honor? People who don't look like you don't have integrity. People who don't worship like you don't have family values. Because McGraw started, then stopped, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Because what, Tim? Because you've been told that diversity is a threat. Because you've been told that progress means leaving you behind. Because you've been told that if other people get equal rights, somehow that takes away from yours. That's not. McGraw's voice broke. You don't understand what it's like to watch everything you grew up believing and get called backward, and ignorant, and hateful. No, I don't understand that, Colbert said, his voice softer now but still relentless. But I do understand what it's like to watch people use the things I grew up believing in, faith and family and community, as weapons against other people. I understand what it's like to see the flag I pledged allegiance to every morning in school get turned into a symbol of division instead of unity. McGraw slumped back into his chair, the fight suddenly going out of him. You think I'm a bigot? I think you're a man who's been told that admitting you might be wrong about something makes you weak, Colbert said. I think you're a man who's been told that the only way to preserve what you love is to fight against change instead of figuring out how to grow with it. And what if I am wrong? McGraw asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if everything I've built my career on, everything I've told my fans, what if it's all been wrong? The question hung in the air like smoke. Colbert leaned back in his chair, studying the man across from him. Then you figure out how to do better. That's what grown-ups do, Tim. They learn. They adapt. They admit their mistakes and they try to do better. McGraw was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You want me to abandon everything I believe in? I want you to examine whether what you believe in is actually what you think it is, Colbert said. I want you to ask yourself whether your beliefs are about love or fear, whether they're about bringing people together or keeping them apart, whether they're about building something beautiful or protecting something that was never as beautiful as you remember it being. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and possibility. Then McGraw stood up again, but this time his movement was different, slower, more deliberate. This time when McGraw stood, there was something different in his posture. Not the angry defensiveness from before, but something harder to read. He looked at Colbert for a long moment, then at the cameras, then back at Colbert. You know what? Stephen McGraw said, his voice steady now. You're right about one thing. I do need to examine what I believe in, but I don't need to do it here, in front of your cameras, for your entertainment. Colbert's eyebrows rose slightly. This isn't entertainment, Tim. This is a conversation. No, this is a trap, McGraw replied, but without the heat from before. You invited me here under the pretense of talking about my music, and instead, you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to get me to say something that will make good television. Well, congratulations, you got your moment. I invited you here to have an honest conversation, Colbert said, If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. McGraw laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want honesty? Here's some honesty for you. I grew up in a town where people didn't lock their doors at night, where if your neighbor needed help, you helped them, no questions asked, where people said please and thank you and meant it, where respect wasn't something you had to earn, it was something you gave freely. That sounds wonderful, Colbert said carefully, but it also sounds like a place where everyone looked the same, thought the same, and believed the same things. Maybe they did, McGraw admitted, but that doesn't make what they believed wrong. It doesn't make their values worthless just because they didn't have your approval. I never said their values were worthless, Colbert replied. I said using those values as a weapon against other people is wrong, and I never said I was using them as a weapon. McGrath shot back, the fire returning to his voice. You made that assumption. You looked at me, heard my accent, saw where I'm from, and decided you knew exactly what kind of person I am. Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but McGraw held up a hand. No, let me finish. You want to talk about prejudice? You want to talk about making assumptions? You've been doing it since I walked out here. You've decided that because I'm from the South, because I sing country music, because I believe in traditional values, that I must be some kind of bigot. Well, let me tell you something, Stephen. I've played concerts for troops overseas. I've donated millions to disaster relief. I've supported literacy programs in underserved communities. I've never once asked what color someone's skin was or who they voted for or who they loved before I helped them. The studio was dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Colbert's face was unreadable. But you know what? McGraw continued, his voice building. It doesn't matter what I've done or who I've helped, because you've already made up your mind about me. You've decided that people like me are the problem, that our values are outdated, that our beliefs are backward, that our way of life is somehow less valid than yours. That's not what I said, Colbert protested. It's exactly what you said, McGraw replied. You just dressed it up in fancy words. In righteous indignation, you want to know what divides this country. It's not people like me singing about small towns and family values. It's people like you who think they're so much smarter, so much more enlightened, so much more moral than everyone else, that they can sit in judgment of half the population. McGrath was fully animated now, his hands gesturing as he spoke. You talk about inclusion, but you exclude anyone who doesn't think exactly like you do. You talk about tolerance, but you have zero tolerance for anyone who doesn't share your worldview. You talk about diversity, but you only want diversity of everything except thought. Tim, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm trying to say, Colbert said, his voice quieter now. No, Stephen, I understand perfectly, McGraw replied. You're trying to say that your way of thinking is the only acceptable way, that your values are the only valid values, that your version of America is the only version that matters. Well, I've got news for you. There are millions of people out there who disagree with you, who live their lives differently than you do, who believe in different things than you believe in, and they're just as American as you are. The audience was stirring now, some people nodding, others looking uncomfortable. McGraw's publicist had stopped typing and was watching with wide eyes. You want to know what real America looks like? McGraw asked, his voice rising again. It looks like all of us. The farmers and the factory workers, the teachers and the truck drivers, the people who go to church every Sunday and the people who've never set foot in one, the people who live in Manhattan penthouses and the people who live in mobile homes, the people who agree with you and the people who don't. That's real America. Stephen, not your version or my version, but all of us together. Colbert was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right about that, Tim, but if we're all America, then we all have a responsibility to each other. We all have a responsibility to make sure that everyone gets treated with dignity and respect. We all have a responsibility to make sure that the America we're building is better than the one we inherited. And who decides what better looks like? McGraw asked. You, me, the people who live in cities, the people who live in rural areas, the people who went to college, the people who didn't. Who gets to decide what America should become? We all do, Colbert said simply. That's how democracy works. We all get a voice. We all get a vote. We all get to participate in the conversation about what kind of country we want to live in. Then maybe you should start treating people who disagree with you like they actually deserve to be part of that conversation, McGrath said, instead of trying to shame them into silence. With that, McGrath reached for his microphone pack again, but this time he didn't fumble with it. He unclipped it cleanly and set it on the chair. Tim, wait, Colbert said, standing up for the first time. I think we were actually getting somewhere. McGrath turned back one last time. No, Stephen, we were getting exactly where you wanted us to get. You got your confrontation. You got your moment. You've got your story about the close-minded country singer who couldn't handle tough questions. Congratulations. I hope it gets you great ratings. And with that, Tim McGraw walked off the set. leaving Stephen Colbert standing alone in front of a stunned studio audience and millions of viewers at home. What did you think of this heated exchange? Did McGraw have a point about being prejudged, or was Colbert right to challenge him on his views? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that dive deep into the moments that had everyone talking.